The palace floated above the clouds like a fortress carved from living stone, its golden towers gleaming under the cold light of 3 distant suns. Inside those walls, silence ruled more fiercely than any emperor. Servants moved with soft steps, their voices kept to whispers, as if afraid that even the air might betray their presence. Somewhere deep within that quiet maze of halls, a boy sat alone on a throne too large for his frail body. Prince Kalen, heir to the mighty dragon empire, stared out at the endless sky with hollow eyes. His legs lay still, useless since the day he was born, his wings folded tight against his back like ornaments meant for display. He had never walked a single step. He had never flown a single breath in the open sky. The empire whispered about him in secret chambers and crowded markets. They said he was cursed. They said the gods had punished the royal bloodline by giving them a son who could not rule, a prince who could not soar. His father, the emperor, did not speak of him except in commands. Keep him hidden, keep him alive, but never let him leave. Kalen had grown in that silence like a shadow, his days marked by the slow passing of light through tall windows, his nights filled with the sound of distant winds he could never touch. But on that cold dawn, the palace doors opened to a new presence. A ship from a distant planet docked at the outer gate, bringing with it a tribute from the humans, servants, machines, and gifts meant to honor the empire's dominance. Among them walked a young human woman named Elara, her steps cautious yet steady as she entered the grand hall. She had been chosen as a maid for the hidden prince, a role no one else dared to take. The other servants watched her with pity and a little fear, for they knew what had happened to those who had failed to please the royal family before. Elara noticed the silence first. It was heavy, like a blanket of dust over a forgotten room. The walls were lined with golden dragons that seemed to stare with accusing eyes. Guards in black armor flanked every doorway, their hands resting on strange, humming weapons. And then she saw him, Prince Kalen, sitting in a high-backed chair, staring at nothing. His hair was silver like molten steel, his eyes a deep gold that should have burned with power, yet carried only a cold, distant glow. His legs were covered with a heavy dark cloak, hiding the truth everyone already knew: he could not stand. When she bowed, the air felt colder. No one spoke. Even the guards looked away, as if they feared the sight of the boy too much. Elara, though, did not look away. She saw more than the broken air. She saw the tension in his hands as they gripped the throne's arms, the faint flicker in his wings as if they wanted to stretch but dared not. There was something beneath the stillness, something waiting. As days passed, Elara learned the ways of the silent palace. She served food the prince rarely touched. She cleaned chambers that no one visited. She dusted strange machines humming softly in the corners of his room, devices older than the empire itself, their purpose a mystery. She was warned never to touch him, never to speak unless asked, never to cross the line marked by the golden tiles before his throne. Yet every night, when the palace slept, she felt his eyes watching her as if trying to remember what it meant to be alive. The winds outside howled like distant creatures, carrying with them the cries of dragons flying high above, a freedom Kalen would never know. Elara began to wonder why the empire kept him alive at all. A crippled heir was a weakness, a shame. And yet the emperor guarded him with more soldiers than any fortress. Something was wrong. Something unspoken hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. On the 7th night, the silence of the palace felt different. The halls seemed to tremble faintly, the golden statues casting longer shadows than before. Elara carried a tray into the prince's chamber, the only light coming from the twin moons outside his balcony. Kalen sat as always, unmoving, but his eyes followed her with a sharpness she had never seen. "Do you hear it?" he whispered, his voice rough like an used metal. She froze. "Hear what?" "The chains," he said, almost too quietly. "They are not on my legs. They are in the walls." Before she could ask more, the door slammed behind her, locking her in. The lights flickered, and for the first time, Elara felt the palace breathe, not like a building, but like a beast awakening from a long sleep. Somewhere in the depths of the fortress, a low hum began to rise, vibrating through the floor and into her bones. Kalen's fingers tightened around the arms of his throne. They keep me here because they fear what I might become, he said, his eyes burning faintly. But something is changing. Ilara felt the tray shake in her hands as a gust of wind swept through the sealed chamber. It smelled of fire and metal, old and wild. She had come as a maid, a servant meant to polish floors and carry water. Yet in that moment, staring at the boy who could neither walk nor fly, she realized she had stepped into something far larger, a secret buried under golden walls, a force the Empire could no longer contain. And far above the palace, among the stars, something answered the silent call. The palace was never truly silent at night. It breathed with low, hidden sounds, the hum of machines buried deep in its bones, the shuffle of armored boots along the outer corridors, and the whisper of the cold wind that slid across the sky bridges. Ilara moved through the darkness with steady steps, carrying a bowl of steaming water and clean cloths for the prince's evening ritual. It was a task no one else wished to do. The other servants avoided his chamber after sunset, muttering of curses and hidden watchers. But she had been sent from a distant world to serve, and fear alone was not enough to stop her. Prince Kalen sat in his usual place, the same chair of dark metal and gold, his thin frame outlined by the glow of a single hovering lamp. His eyes followed her again, as they had every night, unblinking, silent, heavy with something she could not name. His wings, folded and wrapped in silken bindings, trembled ever so slightly when she approached. No guard entered the room with her this time. The door shut with a soft hiss, sealing them in the hush of the upper chamber. She placed the bowl on a low table and stepped back, waiting for a command that did not come. His gaze dropped to her hands, then lifted to her face. There was no warmth there, only a quiet storm. "Do you ever wonder why they send strangers here?" he asked, his voice low but clear, as if testing the weight of each word. Ilara blinked. "I was told the Empire needed servants for its royal blood," she said softly. His lips curled, not in a smile, but in something colder. "Servants? Or jailers?" The words hung in the air like falling ash. Ilara looked toward the sealed door. No one had ever spoken so openly near him. She felt the air thicken, the walls almost listening. "I am only here to help," she whispered. He leaned forward, his cloak sliding to reveal his lifeless legs beneath the cloth. They were pale, untouched by sunlight or wind, the skin marked by faint glowing lines that pulsed like buried embers. "Do you know what they say of me?" "They call you cursed," she said before she could stop herself. Kalen's fingers tightened on the armrests. "Cursed, or contained." A sudden tremor passed through the room. The hovering lamp flickered, shadows stretching long across the walls. Ilara took a step forward, driven by a pull she could not explain. She had been warned, never cross the golden line that marked the edge of his dais, never touch him. But tonight, the air felt alive, like a storm waiting to break. His eyes locked on hers. "Do you fear me, human?" She wanted to answer, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she moved closer. Her hand hovered over his wing, its scales dull and cold under the faint light. He did not flinch. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. And then her fingers brushed the edge of his wing. The effect was immediate. A sharp breath escaped him, his eyes widening with a golden glow that burned like trapped fire. The chamber trembled violently. The bowl on the table spilled, steam rising as the water ran across the floor. Outside, alarms began to hum, a deep, vibrating sound that rattled the glass in the windows. "Ilara!" His voice was no longer soft. It roared through the room, deeper than his frail frame should have allowed. His legs twitched, a single, sudden motion that sent the silken bindings tearing apart. She stumbled back, heart pounding. I didn't mean." "You touched the chain," he said, his voice a mix of wonder and warning. "And it broke." The door burst open. Guards flooded in, weapons raised, their dark armor gleaming. The captain's voice cut through the noise. "Seize her." Ilara froze as cold metal clamped around her wrists. Kalen tried to rise, his hands gripping the chair, his wings twitching as if they remembered what flight felt like. A faint golden glow pulsed through the floor beneath him, racing along the walls like lightning trapped in stone. She touched the air. One guard hissed. "That is forbidden by imperial law." "She woke me," Kalen said, his voice carrying a strange power now. "Release her." The captain hesitated. Orders had been clear. No one was to interfere with the heir's condition. But now the prince's gaze burned with an authority none of them had seen in years. The glow from his veins spread to his wings, a faint heat lifting dust from the floor. Ilara's breath came fast. The guards looked uneasy, their hands tightening on their weapons, unsure whether to obey the emperor's law or the heir's command. Outside, the alarms continued to pulse, echoing across the silent palace like a warning to the stars themselves. Kalen's voice cut through the confusion, calm and heavy as a falling blade. "If you harm her, you will answer to me. I am not broken anymore." For the first time, the guards stepped back. The captain lowered his weapon, uncertainty in his eyes. Something in the room had changed, not only in the prince, but in the air itself. It felt alive now, charged, as if the palace's ancient heart had been forced to beat again. Ilara stood in the center of it, bound but unbroken, her heart still racing from the spark she had unleashed with a single touch. She had come as a maid, a nameless servant from a forgotten world. But tonight, in this golden prison above the clouds, she had woken a storm. And storms, once awakened, do not return to sleep. The palace above the clouds had never known a night so tense. Rumors spread like smoke through its endless halls, servants whispering about the moment the crippled heir moved, guards exchanging fearful glances at the glow they had seen beneath the throne. The wind howled across the high towers, carrying with it the scent of an old power that had not stirred in years. Prince Kalen, once kept hidden like a secret wound, now lay in his chamber with his wings uncovered, the silken bindings torn and scattered on the floor. His legs twitched faintly, as if remembering the shape of movement, as if the chains within him were loosening one by one. Ilara sat in the shadowed corner, wrists now free, the guards dismissed by the prince's command. Her heart still pounded from the chaos of the previous night. She had touched what no one dared to touch. She had felt the cold, strange power run through her fingers and wake something that the Empire had worked so hard to bury. The glow had faded to a faint pulse beneath Kalen's skin, but it was there, alive, restless, growing. When dawn spilled through the high windows, Kalen spoke. His voice was low, almost thoughtful, yet it carried a new weight. "They told me I would never walk. They told me my wings would remain as stone. But when you touched me, something broke free. Tell me, why?" Ilara shook her head. "I do not know. I only wanted to help." His gaze stayed fixed on her, golden eyes sharp like the edge of a blade. Help, or change? The question lingered between them, thick with meaning neither fully understood. Outside the chamber, hurried footsteps passed, the sound of messengers and soldiers moving with unusual urgency. Kalen tilted his head slightly, listening to the noise. "They are afraid," he murmured. "They feel the storm before it arrives." By midday, the Emperor's council sent for him. Heavy doors opened, revealing robed figures lined along a dark table, their faces hidden by masks shaped like dragon skulls. They demanded answers. Why had the alarm sounded? Why had the forbidden maid been allowed near him? What had awakened the old pulse in the palace walls? Kalen said nothing at first. His fingers traced the arm of his chair, his wings twitching faintly. Then, in a voice that made the nearest candles flicker, he said, "Because I chose it." The council murmured among themselves, uneasy. One of the elder advisors stepped forward, his mask gleaming in the dim light. "The heir was born, unstable," he said, choosing each word with care. "The Empire cannot risk that power unleashed. It is for your own safety that you remain as you are." Kalen's golden eyes burned. "You mean it is for your throne's safety?" The words fell like a stone into water, rippling through the room. Guards stiffened. The council fell silent. Ilara, waiting just outside the hall, heard it too. She pressed a hand to the cold wall, her heart racing. There was more to this than weakness. The prince was not born broken, he was made to remain so. That night, Kalen returned to his chamber with his jaw set and his hands trembling, not with fear, but with resolve. "They fear what I carry," he said quietly to Elara. "They keep me here because if I rise, their rule will shake." The glow beneath his skin grew stronger as the hours passed. His legs twitched again, longer this time, the muscles straining as if waking from a long and bitter sleep. He gripped the edge of the throne and, for a moment, his weight shifted forward. Not a step, just a tilt, but enough to make the floor hum with that same buried energy. Elara moved to his side despite every warning in her mind. "You cannot rush it," she whispered. "I cannot wait forever," he replied. "Every chain that held me is cracking. The Empire has lied to me, and I have been their silent prisoner. But your touch, lit the first fire." The night stretched long, the stars outside sharp and distant. Guards patrolled more heavily now, their shadows cutting across the door like dark blades. Somewhere deeper in the palace, machinery stirred, old restraints, old failsafes, all built to contain what he was. And in his dreams, Kalen saw more. Firestorms over blackened cities. Warships with human markings. A figure, tall, faceless, standing at the edge of a battlefield, whispering something he could not yet hear. When he woke, the tremor in his legs was stronger. His wings twitched like sails catching a sudden wind. Elara stood at his side, a damp cloth in her hand, her face pale but steady. She had not run. She had not begged to leave. "Do you still fear me?" he asked, his voice softer now. She met his gaze. "I fear the Empire more." A faint smile touched his lips for the first time. "Then we may yet survive this." Outside, thunder rolled across the clouds though no storm had been called. The silent palace was no longer silent. It was listening, shifting, preparing for something it had buried too long. And somewhere in the dark halls, messengers carried orders of execution, exile, and war, unsure which would come first. The heir who was never meant to stand had begun to rise. The days that followed were heavy with silence, but it was not the quiet of peace. It was the stillness before a storm. The floating palace drifted high above the red clouds of the Dragon Empire, its walls echoing with hushed whispers and muffled commands. Servants moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. Guards stood in doubled numbers at the gates, their armor gleaming under the cold light of twin moons. Something unseen was building, and everyone felt it. In the heart of that tension, Prince Kalen began to change. His legs, once lifeless as stone, now responded to his will, each night a little stronger, each dawn a little less fragile. His wings stretched wider, their membranes catching the golden glow of sunrise. It was painful, each movement like fire tearing through sleeping nerves, but he welcomed the pain. It meant freedom was no longer a myth whispered behind closed doors. Elara, the human maid who had sparked it all, stayed at his side. She moved through the chamber with quiet determination, washing the marks where the glowing veins ran beneath his skin, watching them brighten when she touched him. It frightened her how warm he felt now, as if a furnace had been lit deep inside his chest. "Every night it grows stronger," she whispered as she fastened the bandages. "And every day, they send more guards." Kalen's gaze turned toward the window, where black-winged sentries patrolled the skies. "They will not allow this to continue. They will act soon." He was right. In the council chambers, the elders argued. Some called for the maid's death, fearing her presence had awakened the forbidden pulse. Others, more cunning, whispered of using her. Perhaps she was the key to controlling the heir's power, binding it to their will. At the center of their plans stood the emperor himself, silent but watchful, his golden claws drumming against the arm of his throne. One evening, Elara found a sealed door behind the prince's chamber, a door the guards never approached. Its lock bore ancient runes, faint but pulsing. Curiosity pushed her closer. With trembling hands, she pressed her palm against it, and felt a surge of heat, like a heartbeat answering her own. That night, she told Kalen. His expression darkened. "They hide something there," he said quietly. "Something about me. Something they fear I will remember." He tried to stand again. His legs wobbled but did not fail. His claws dug into the cold floor as he forced himself upright, breath sharp, eyes glowing like molten gold. For the first time, he stood without support. The pulse beneath the palace seemed to answer him, a deep and ancient echo stirring far below. The next morning, the attempt on their lives came. Not with open blades, but with silent poison poured into their food. Ilara caught the scent first, bitter, wrong, mixed with the fruit she had been given to serve. She struck the plate from Kaelin's hands just as the door opened and 3 armored figures entered, faces hidden, orders unreadable in their cold stance. Kaelin stepped forward before they could speak. His voice was no longer the soft whisper of a broken air. It rolled like distant thunder. "You would poison me in my own hall?" The lead assassin reached for his blade. He never drew it. Kaelin's hand rose, and for a heartbeat, the air itself trembled. Flames burst from his fingertips, wild and unshaped, filling the chamber with heat. The assassins fell back, armor scorched, retreating through the doorway with curses on their tongues. Ilara stared at him, breathless. You controlled it." "No," he said, lowering his hand, smoke curling from his claws. "That was only the beginning." The palace was no longer safe. The council would not stop. They would try again, louder, harder, crueler. Kaelin knew now that the key to his freedom was not hidden outside the walls, but buried within them, behind that sealed door Ilara had found. Together, they planned. At dawn, when the guards changed, Ilara would distract them. Kaelin, walking for the first time with the weight of a predator, would break the seal and uncover the truth they had kept from him. But as the twin moons set, and the red sun bled across the horizon, the palace began to hum, soft, steady, like the growl of a beast long asleep. Somewhere in its deep foundations, old machinery stirred, ancient locks tightened, and a message went out to the farthest towers: contain the air, whatever the cost. Ilara heard it in the whispers. Kaelin felt it in his bones. The flames within him had only just begun to burn, and already the Empire moved to smother them. The floating palace trembled as the dawn wind swept across its spires, carrying the taste of iron and distant thunder. The Empire's banners rippled along the battlements, their golden threads catching the light of the rising sun, but the air beneath them was thick with fear. Guards no longer walked their patrols in silence. They marched in pairs, eyes sharp, fingers close to their weapons. The council's whispers had turned to orders, and those orders had turned to blades in the dark. Kaelin felt it in the walls, in the pulse beneath the floor, in the quiet that came before the storm. Each step he took now was stronger, his legs no longer the lifeless burden they once were. His wings twitched with restless energy, their membranes tightening like sails ready to catch a breaking wind. Ilara stood beside him, her hands wrapped in worn cloth where the assassin's blades had grazed her. She had not left him, though she could have escaped. She stayed, because the palace no longer felt like a prison to her, it felt like a trap waiting to spring. That morning, the sealed door groaned open. Not by stealth, but by force. Kaelin pressed his palm against the runes, and felt them shatter like glass under the weight of his awakening power. Behind it lay a hidden hall lined with tubes of dull silver, machines older than the Empire itself, and at its center, a cradle of black stone with chains trailing into the floor. It was shaped for a child's body, but the marks on its surface told a different story, a prison disguised as a bed, made to hold him when he was still too young to resist. Ilara traced the carvings with trembling fingers. "They never meant to heal you," she whispered. "They meant to keep you this way." Kaelin's claws curled around the cold frame. Memories stirred, flashes of light, the sharp sting of needles, voices arguing in a language not of this world. He saw, for the first time, the faint imprint of human symbols beneath the dragon runes. His blood was not pure. His weakness was not fate. It was design. The discovery changed everything. The council had not only feared him, they had lied about what he was. Part dragon, part something else, something born beyond their skies. The alarm sounded before they could leave. Bells howled through the high towers, and the great gates slammed shut. Shadows moved across the balcony outside, and a cold voice echoed through the halls. By order of the Emperor, the traitor Heir is to be contained. The human Maid is to be seized on sight. Kalen turned toward the doors as they burst inward. Dozens of armored guards flooded the chamber, their spears raised, their wings spread wide. The sky beyond them darkened with more black-winged enforcers diving in tight formations, their eyes burning with the will of the throne. Ilara stepped back, but Kalen did not retreat. For the first time in his life, he spread his wings fully. The membranes tore free from their bindings with a sound like thunder. Heat rolled off his skin, and the air shimmered with a strange light. "You kept me caged," he said, his voice low but carrying through the storm. "Now watch me rise." The clash began like a breaking storm. Blades clashed against claws, the air thick with smoke and the shriek of torn metal. Kalen fought with raw, unshaped power, bursts of flame that scorched the walls, gusts of wind that sent soldiers sprawling. Each step he took shattered the ground they had built to hold him down. Ilara darted through the chaos, pulling fallen weapons from the floor, cutting ropes, knocking over the spears aimed at his back. She had no training in war, but she moved like someone who had survived too much to hesitate now. The battle spilled onto the outer balcony, the vast clouds swirling beneath like a living sea. Kalen stumbled once, his legs still not fully steady, but his wings caught the rising wind. The first beat nearly threw him from the edge, the second lifted him a hand's breadth off the ground. The guards froze for a heartbeat, fear flashing in their eyes. The heir who could never walk was rising. A spear struck the stone where he had stood. Another tore through his wing, leaving a burning hole. He roared, not in pain, but in fury, and the palace itself seemed to answer. Flames erupted from the hidden hall, tearing through the old machines, lighting the sky with a pillar of golden fire. "Kalen!" Ilara shouted, reaching for him as the balcony cracked beneath their feet. He caught her hand just as the stone gave way, the two of them plunging into the open air. For a breath, there was nothing but the rush of wind and the roar of the empire above. Then his wings caught the current, fierce and unsteady but strong enough to hold. The palace receded behind them, a fortress of smoke and betrayal, its towers lit with fire and alarm. He carried her higher, away from the blades, away from the lies. Below them, the red clouds parted, revealing the endless night of the empire's sky. Above them, the stars waited, cold and bright, as if daring him to claim them. Ilara clung to him, her voice lost in the wind, but he heard the word she whispered, "Free!" For the first time, the heir of the Dragon Empire flew, not as a prisoner, but as something the council had feared all along, a storm they could not control. The sky was still burning behind them when Kalen and Ilara drifted into the cold reaches of night. The floating palace, once a prison of gold and silence, was now a silhouette of broken towers and falling embers. Alarms still echoed faintly through the high clouds, their sound like the dying howl of a wounded beast. The Empire would not forget what had happened, and it would not forgive. Kalen's wings trembled under the strain, torn in places where spears had struck him, but they held. Each beat sent a sharp ache through his back, yet it also sent a thrill of something new, freedom mixed with fury. The weight of chains was gone, replaced by a burden heavier still, the truth. He was not only a dragon heir. There was human blood in his veins, a secret the Emperor had locked away since his birth. A secret that made him dangerous. Ilara clung to him as the wind roared, her hair whipped across her face, her eyes fixed on the endless dark ahead. She had never flown before, not like this, with nothing between her and the sky but torn wings and determination. She had no throne to lose, no crown to break, only the decision to stay beside the one creature in this empire who had chosen her over fear. "Where do we go?" she shouted over the wind. Kalen's golden eyes scanned the horizon. Far ahead, the empire's lights faded into the black void between stars. "Away," he said. "Far enough that their chains cannot reach. But not to hide. Not forever." They descended at dawn onto the jagged cliffs of an old mining world, a place the Empire had abandoned long ago. Rusted cranes and silent towers stood like bones against the rising sun. Here, the air was thin and bitter, but it gave them cover. Here, for a moment, they could breathe. Ilara tended his wounds with what little she had, strips torn from her sleeves, water drawn from a cracked pipe. His skin was hot under her hands, the glow beneath still pulsing, stronger now than ever. "They will come," she whispered. "They cannot let you live after this." Kalen's gaze turned toward the sky, where the first distant glimmers of patrol ships moved like cold stars. "Let them come. They caged me because they feared what I might become. Now they will see it." She looked at him, unsure if his words promised salvation or war. "And what will you become?" He closed his eyes, feeling the heat in his blood, the alien pulse that had woken the moment her hand touched his wings. Something they cannot control. Not their air. Not their weapon. Something else. That night, the two of them found a forgotten hangar carved into the cliffside. Dust lay thick on its floor, but beneath it waited a ship. Small, old, but intact. Human markings traced its hull, faded but still readable. Ilara ran her fingers over them, recognition sparking in her eyes. "This is from my world," she whispered. This is how they brought me here." Kalen stepped closer, his claws tracing the same lines. The truth settled heavy between them. The Empire had not only hidden him, they had taken her to control him. Two pieces of the same lie. As the sun rose for the second time, the sky above the mining world filled with dark shapes. Patrols, search craft, armored wings hunting for the escaped heir. Their voices crackled over the wind, sharp and cold. "Contain the traitor. Capture the human." Kalen spread his wings, now stronger, patched but fierce. "We leave now," he said. "Not as fugitives. As the storm they tried to bury." Ilara climbed into the cockpit, her hands moving over the controls with growing certainty. The old ship groaned, engines coughing to life, their glow lighting the cliffside. The patrols turned toward the sound, their wings folding in attack formation. The first shots split the air as the ship lifted. Kalen leapt onto the ramp, his claws leaving scorched marks where they touched the metal. Flames licked along his arms, not wild now but guided, wrapping the hull in a brief shield of heat that turned the first volley aside. Through the haze of smoke and rising light, they climbed. The mining world shrank beneath them, the Empire's hunters closing fast, but the stars opened wide above. For the first time, Kalen was not falling. He was choosing his own sky. Ilara turned to him as the stars stretched across the cockpit glass. "What now?" He looked forward, where the black beyond the Empire waited like an unwritten page. "Now," he said, "we find the ones who did this to us. We find the truth they buried." The ship slipped past the edge of the patrol net, engines flaring as it leapt toward the void. Behind them, the Dragon Empire roared in anger, its chains broken, its sky torn. Ahead, a galaxy of unanswered questions waited, and for the first time, the heir who could never walk carried his own future in his wings.